Once again, we gather to present the Ned Gramlich Award for Responsible Finance. Ned Gramlich served as a governor of the Federal Reserve from 1997 through 2005. During that time, he was an outspoken critic of predatory lending and a strong defender of the Community Reinvestment Act. Ned was serving on the OFN board at the time of his death in September 2007. Ned was resolute in his conviction that all government policies should advance economic opportunities for everyone. And today we honor another leader who shares this set of beliefs, Bill Bynum. The list of our colleagues who nominated Bill reads like a who's who of leaders in our field, including Martin Eakes and Cliff Rosenthal, both former Gramlich awardees. In fact, Martin is here with us today. Cliff is not. Where are you, Martin? I know you're out there. There he is. Thank you for being here in honor of Bill. 20 years ago, Bill launched the Enterprise Corporation of the Delta as a $1.5 million business loan fund in Mississippi, and the Hope Community Credit Union soon followed. Today, Hope is a $400 million organization with 24 locations. Bill was recruited to take on this startup from his first job out of college in 1983 as the second paid employee at the Center for Community Self-Help in Durham, North Carolina, where Bill helped build the self-help credit union with Martin Eakes that we all view as a national model today. Recently, Bill was awarded the John P. McNulty Prize, whose purpose is to galvanize efforts to address the social, economic, and environmental challenges of our time by recognizing the best of the exceptional leaders among participants in the Aspen Global Leadership Network, of which Bill is a member. The McNulty Prize is added to a multitude of awards and recognitions received by Bill over the years, highlighting the immense importance of his work and Hope's work, and Bill's effectiveness through difficult times in a very challenged part of the country, the Mississippi Delta. When I spoke to Bill's close colleagues about him, the words frequently used were leadership and courage. Many of you know of the role Hope played mobilizing human and financial resources on the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Katrina to ensure that the recovery reached everyone, and specifically conducted research and led the advocacy that resulted in recovery grants for homeowners without property insurance at double the amount of those with property insurance, the reverse of the initial intent of the government. There are dozens of similar stories about Bill's work and the way he approached his work. When I spoke to Bill a few days ago, he talked about how proud he is to have been able to help others through programs such as AEO and the Support Center, for which he and Martin Eakes, again, wrote the original bylaws. He said, organizing the field, serving on boards to help others, and doing policy work were the highlights of his accomplishments. I call that an understatement. Today, Bill chairs CFED. He serves on the board of the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, and he's on the board of the Institute for Racial Reconciliation at the University of Mississippi. One last item before we hear from Bill. Bill chaired the CDFI Advisory Committee from 2002 through 2013, covering the Bush years. It was a discouraging time as we all worked to keep the CDFI fund alive. You can imagine the weight lifted from his shoulders, as broad as they are, when he first sat down with the Obama transition team and was able to propose a better future for CDFIs and the communities we serve. Thanks to Bill's perseverance, that was a happy day for all of us. And today is another one as we honor Bill with the Ned Gramlich Award. Please welcome Bill Bynum.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Trinidad. 30 years of OFN. Congratulations. Last night, Bob Shaw and I were reflecting on being at an early NACDLF, I think that was the acronym we were using then, Association of Community Development Loan Fund meeting at the 4-H Club in Washington. And I don't think there was quite as many people there as there are here. I owe so much to so many people. But first and foremost, I want to thank my colleagues at Hope, and I'm so glad that Alan Branson, Cassandra Williams, Dee Jones, and Mary Elizabeth Evans are here with me. Y'all stand up, please. And I cannot go too far without saying a few words about our good friend Jack Litzenberg, who passed away earlier this year. Jack was indeed one of a kind. When I was a bit nervously considering moving from North Carolina to Mississippi, Jack was one of the first people that I talked to. And, you know, Jack said, Bill, you're ready, that you had something to contribute in a region of the country that was more distressed than any place else in America, and that if you go to work in the Delta, you make sure they know that the Mott Foundation is going to be there with you. And as he always was, Jack was true to his word. I miss his friendship, his humor, and his wisdom. And so, again, Jack's here with us today. And I'm sorry I couldn't be here with you yesterday, but I was glad. I looked at the film. Several people said, Bill, we saw you on film and you were much younger. You didn't have all this gray. And but, you know, I'm glad I'm still here and have a little bit of this gray. But I was glad to see that, I was glad to see Ron Grzelski in the video, and wanted to make sure that we recognize, as we look at this milestone for OFN, that we recognize the incredible work that Shorebank contributed to this industry. I was glad to see George Surgeon here. Where's George? I know George, hopefully George is here somewhere. There's George. Had the privilege to work with George when I first moved to the Delta. And, you know, we all owe a huge debt of gratitude to George, to Ron, to Mary Houghton, and Ellen Seidman. I saw Ellen here, and the colleagues at Shorebank. Without Shorebank, Bill Clinton would not have committed to a federal program to establish a national network of community development banks and microloan funds. That would not be a CDFI fund. And I wouldn't have made the decision to move to work in the Arkansas Delta. And this certainly would be a much smaller conference. So while many may consider Shorebank to be a great case study, and that it is, but it's also very much responsible for much of the success that the CDFI movement has achieved. And so, George, Ellen, Shorebank, thank you very much. It is great to be here with so many friends, folks I haven't seen in a while, but people, so many I've been able to learn from over the years. I've been on the boards of OFN, Self-Help, the Calvert Foundation, Southern Development Bank, AEO, Partners for Common Good, the Support Center. You wonder when I get time to really do my day job. But you know, I was taking lessons from all of these folks. I've also had the privilege of working with several past Gramlich Award winners. Maybe that's the trick to receiving this award. One of the first calls I got was from Julie Eads. You know, there's no bigger heart or advocate for the work that we do. Unfortunately, Cliff Rosenthal can't be here. No one's worked harder for credit unions or for the CDFI movement than Cliff. Many of you know that his wife was ill. Talked to Cliff this morning. She should be released from the hospital today, which was great news. I had the privilege to be on an open plenary OFN a few years ago in Philly with Jeremy Nowak. Brilliant guy. You want Jeremy on your side during an argument. Ron Phillips got the award last year, quintessential organizer, my rural comrade in arms. We did a peer exchange several years ago, a lobster for catfish exchange between the Delta and Maine. Ron's an amazing guy, and I think Corinne is here. Another woman, stand up. We met when I was Les Gray up at Tillery Casket Company up in Northeast North Carolina. She was checking on a worker co-op in rural North Carolina that she and Adrian Dominicans had supported through our work at self-help. And it was really my first exposure to how smart and cool the sisters were. But I learned so much from Corinne and Martin. I remember Martin offered me a job at a bagel factory in Durham. I almost was thinking that he was going to offer me the bagel dog as my salary, but he said, "No, we want you to work here, but you got to go out and raise your own salary." And I was naive enough to do it, and I'm glad that I did. I could not have been. I had it in my head that I was going to go back to go to law school at North Carolina. I wanted to be the next Thurgood Marshall, but this was at a time in the mid-'80s when the Reagan courts were starting to overturn a lot of decisions that I cared quite a bit about, and soon came to be clear that economic justice was more enduring often than what you could achieve in the courts. And so we set out to do what we could to help workers buy their own companies. When we found out that banks wouldn't finance them, we said we'd start our own credit union. And we did, and now Self-Help Credit Union is an amazing organization. I've certainly taken a lot of the lessons from Self-Help back to the Mid-South and incorporated it into our work. Self-Help actually financed the first. I grew up in a trailer, a single-wide trailer. Had holes in the floor, and we finally got out of that into a stick-built home. And it's really cool that the first loan that we got for buy a home was made by the credit union that Martin and many of us helped to organize. So Martin got a lot from Martin. He used to say, "Somebody's got to make the rules. Why not us?" And I think he's still living by that credo, and I certainly have taken it as far as I can take it. So, Martin, thanks for all that you've done for me. I'm honored to join them and Ned Gramlich as recipients of this award. I did not know Ned, but I was deeply moved yesterday to receive a note of thanks and congratulations from Ruth Gramlich. She wanted us to know that she is touched when others remember her late husband's commitment to community development, and I was just blown away that she thanked me. Wow. It was her husband that really paved the way for much of what we're doing to protect consumers from abuses. So he raised the alarm, and thank God he did. I want to thank OFN and the board for considering me worthy, for Lisa Mensa, and my colleague Ed Stevak for nominating me. It's not lost on me that I'm the first recipient of color. To a large degree, that's not particularly material, but it is a fact, and it's a fact that allows me to speak from a vantage point that no prior recipients have been able to speak from. And no matter how much Martin may think he's a black man, he is not, even though he is my brother. He is not a brother. So, as I mentioned, I've had a lot of help, a lot of luck and time in coming to play, many mentors that helped me to get where I am today. Several unsung people of color. I think about people like Bishop Leach. Bishop Leach was a vice principal of school that I went to when I moved from New York to North Carolina as a kid. He ran a credit union out of the garage in his home. We'd walk past it on the way home from school, and he would make loans to people who weren't welcome in the Central Carolina Bank, people who needed just a few dollars at a responsible, affordable rate to make ends meet. I think about James Gilliam. He was a very fiery manager at St. Luke's Credit Union in eastern North Carolina. He left no doubt about what his members deserved, and he fought to make it happen. And he paved the way for many of the community development credit unions across North Carolina. Think about Woodrow Keon. Mr. Keon almost single-handedly kept College Station Federal Credit Union in Arkansas open for 50 years until he was in his late 80s. After College Station merged with Hope Credit Union, he came almost daily by the branch to make sure that we understood the needs of the people he'd worked for 50 years to serve, and he kept coming in until the day he passed a few years ago. These were all pioneers. These were people who worked much of their lives to provide access to financial services to underserved people, despite a lack of resources, despite lack of support, and often in the face of outright opposition. There are so many others who are deserving of this honor, so I accept this award on behalf of those who paved the way for me and for many of us, but did not get the just recognition for their contributions. Are there any football fans here? Well, I bring you greetings from the center of the college football universe. And those of you who know me know that this is a bit odd coming from a diehard Tar Heel in a part of the country where everything is second to basketball. But since I've been in Mississippi, I've been reprogrammed to appreciate the importance of college football, and Mississippi State is the #1 ranked team in the country. And the University of Mississippi is #3, and back home it seems like nothing else seems to matter. One of the things that sports does is allows you a temporary escape from reality. It also offers a lot of great metaphors. Now, how many of y'all saw the film Remember the Titans? If for those of you haven't seen it, hopefully folk will clue you in, you go see it. But it's a great movie, but it's not just about football. It's about diversity. It's about inclusion, about the importance of pushing past those isms, building on the strength of your teammates, those who outwardly seem different, but when the layers are pulled back, they all want the same things, they have the same desires, the same hopes, but they can only achieve them when they work together. One of the great lines in the movie came when after the team had imploded because nobody's working together. A couple of schools have been forced to integrate in Virginia, and a black coach, played by Denzel Washington, had come in to run the team. And the white coach who had been the head of the very successful team was demoted to the assistant coach. Well, after the teams had been very dysfunctional, Julius, the star black player, tells Gary, the white All-American team captain, that the white players aren't blocking for the black players and that he's just going to look out for himself. There's no team here. And Gary says that's the worst attitude he's ever seen. And one of the great lines of the movie, Julius says, "Attitude reflects leadership, Captain. Attitude reflects leadership." I guess, what kind of attitudes permeate our organizations, our industry? What kind of leaders are we? How important is it that we understand our markets? Are we developing and offering products that truly meet the needs of our markets that we say we serve, or are we providing what we think is best for them? Are we practicing what we preach? Are we as innovative in developing diverse teams and leadership in our organizations as we are in putting together financing transactions? Or do we give up too easily when our natural networks don't immediately give us the results that we want? Does diversity on our board simply check the box, or are they built with people who are independent enough to ask the tough questions? Another moment from Remember the Titans that gave me goosebumps was when, during a playoff game, the referees were clearly calling phantom calls against the Titans, cheating so that the all-white team would win. The white assistant coach of the Titans, again, who had been earlier demoted from being the head coach when the school was integrated, confronted the head referee and told him that he would go to the papers and make sure that he went to jail if they didn't get away from stop fixing the game. Then he went back to his defensive players and told them to make sure that their opponents Always remember the day that they played the Titans. Then he told Coach Boone, the black head coach, who had been brought in to take over the team and who was in charge of the offense, to run up the score and leave no doubt about the outcome. Folks, we must leave no doubt when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equity. We must prioritize it in who we serve, in our marketing, and where we locate our offices, and how we staff our organizations, and our governance, and our leadership. This is a critical time in our country. The United States is getting more diverse than ever. Economic justice, income inequality at the forefront of domestic policy dialogue. Even Standard & Poor's is saying that income inequality is a drag on the economy. It's not just those radical left do-gooders who's saying it. You know, it's the business communities that are starting to take note. Nor are these issues more pronounced than they are in the Deep South, particularly in Mississippi. For the first time since the early part of the 20th century, there are now more children of color in the state of Mississippi than there are white children, yet the two groups start from dramatically different places. In Mississippi, 19% of the white kids are in poverty, compared to 52% of the black kids. These numbers aren't surprising, though, when you think about the employment situation in our state. In Mississippi, there are only 6 counties where the African-American unemployment rate is below 10%. In contrast, there are only 4 counties in the state where the white unemployment is above 10%. In Sharkey County in the Mississippi Delta, where 71% of the population is African American, the unemployment rate for whites is less than 1%, and for African Americans is 17%. The unbanked data are much like the unemployment data. 5% of the households in Mississippi are unbanked, compared to 31% of the black households. In Arkansas, 72% of African Americans, 72%, are either unbanked or underbanked. When low-income households have a transaction account, they're more likely to own assets, be able to buy a car, to buy a home. But in the absence of a banking relationship, no job, no bank account, no assets, no future. I've had several candid conversations with leaders of traditional banks who acknowledge that their institutions have never served people of color as well as they would like. And it's only gotten worse since the financial crisis, as they have left low-income communities in record numbers. So it's up to us. If we don't get this right, who will? I'm not suggesting that we let banks abdicate their responsibility. In fact, there are many banks who want to help. Goldman Sachs is one of them, Capital One, Wells Fargo is doing some good things. And I know the CDFIs certainly can't do this alone. But we cannot wait for an epiphany, because the gap between the haves and have-nots is widening. And while we don't act, thousands and thousands of families are going deeper and deeper into an economic abyss. So how will we respond? What will CDFIs do to offer an alternative to the proliferation of predatory online business financing? Are we going to step up and take away the argument that often is used because it says that people use consumer loans that charge 500, 600, 700%, have no alternative sources of financing? Are we going to sit by and accept the fact that prime lending for white mortgage borrowers has returned actually is above pre-recession levels, while prime mortgages for black borrowers is a quarter of where it was before the financial crisis? And it was shamefully inadequate even then. Fortunately, the solutions do not require rocket science. There are opportunities for CDFIs to scale up our work. We have a base model that works, but we have to up our games. We have to scale up. We have to do it in a diverse, inclusive, and equitable way. The solutions will require leadership and will require action. Mark, you might remember, and some of the 50 people who came to the conference in Memphis back in 2001, that the theme of that conference was very similar to this conference. It was inclusive prosperity in a diverse society. A little familiar there. I hope that we will be having a very different conversation 13 years ago. That was in 2001. We're in 2014. What will we be talking about 13 years from now? Nearly 50 years ago, in his final address to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Martin Luther King asked the question, where do we go from here? And he put forward a very impassioned call for economic justice. He said, let us be dissatisfied until the tragic walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort and the inner city of poverty and despair shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. Folks, it's up to us. It's up to each of you to make this vision a reality. It's up to us to ensure diversity, inclusion, and equity. My brothers and sisters, it's time to take our work to the next level. Leave no doubt. Leave no doubt. Thank you very much.